Welcome back to the channel. We're back with our commander deck profile with Kami of the Crescent Moon. For 2 mana, you get a 1/3 where at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, allowing us to draw some additional cards. Our opponents do get them a little bit before we do, but that's fine because they'll probably convince them not to attack us for a little bit because we're giving them draw power. Then we have some ways to just benefit off that draw power ourselves, some ways to, win out of nowhere because our opponents hopefully weren't attacking us and we're just stacking up cards in our hand. And ways to let both us, our opponent, draw more cards, ways to let everyone play some more lands, all the fun group hug stuff with having an actual way to win the game in here as well. But that's going to be a general overview of the deck. Let's get into it card by card. We have Arcane Signet start off for a little bit of mana. Black Vice, when it enters the battlefield, choose an opponent at the beginning of the chosen player's upkeep. Deal damage to them equal to the number of cards in their hand -4. So you do choose the person that everyone sees as biggest threat in order to say like, oh look, I'm helping get rid of them. You let them draw a little bit of cards, let them deal some damage to themselves. Canter of Endless Water, we're going to be drawing a lot of cards. We want to make sure we don't have to discard them at the end of every turn. So this helps us out with the mana, along with giving us no maximum hand size on top of that. Imperial Plate, once again, drawing a lot of cards. Want to make sure we get a little bit of benefit off that. So we're going to get +1/+1 on our creature for each card in our hand, which drawing 2 every turn. No maximum hand size from some other cards in here. That could be easily a 100-103 for Kami there. Probably not though. Folio Fancies, 2 mana. No one has a maximum hand size anymore. This way you even help out your opponents a little bit, convincing them not to attack you. And then pay XX, where each player draws X cards, helping you help them out along with yourself. And 3 mana for each opponent puts a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand from the top of their library to the graveyard. So since we are helping our opponents draw a lot more cards, they'll help us mill them a little bit faster. Font of Mythos, at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws 2 additional cards. That's a draw step as well. Same thing with Kami, allowing everyone to now draw 4 cards every turn. With Folio Fancies, we're getting their deck out pretty quickly. Jipor Ori, each player may play an additional land every turn, allowing us to get those lands out of our hand so that we can actually cast our spells to help out our opponents just a little bit more. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they have no cards in hand, that player draws 3 cards. There's going to rarely be a time where we have no cards in hand, given how much draw power we have in here, but potentially it could help us deck out our opponent a little bit faster. Howling Mine, another way to make sure so everyone draws an additional card. We like to see it. We like to make it so that they could get through their deck just a little bit faster. Ivory Tower, at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain life, where X is number of cards in your hand -4, quite the opposite of that card we were reading earlier, which deals damage to an opponent. But yeah, makes it so we stay alive just a little bit longer. There's that book that does something similar, and also gives you no maximum hand size, which is a little bit better, but this one we're trying to build a bit more of a budget friendly. River Turn Monument, our opponents are going to probably have to discard some cards at a certain point in the game. Especially if we have them draw like half their deck, for example. But then you just have them mill cards equals the number of cards in their graveyard, and potentially deck out the people who are the problems. Soul Ring for some additional mana, of course. Temple Bell, another way makes it everyone's drawing just a few more cards. You need more cards in your hand so that you can deck yourself out faster. Doppler Fabricator, draw a second card each turn, get 1/1 Doppler artifact. Allows us to get some benefit off of that draw power. Even if it is only like once per turn, it's still helpful there. Dot Vessel, no maximum hand size, a little bit of mana, we like to see it. And Wayfarer's Bauble for that little bit of ramp that we'll need. Back to our creatures, we have Academy Lore Master. At the beginning of each player's draw step, they draw an additional card. If they do, spells cost 2 more to cast for them, so it puts our opponent a little bit behind if they want that little bit of extra draw power. And maybe if we don't have anything we want to do, we could just sit there and draw some extra cards. Elantra the Sky Dreamer, whenever you draw your second card each turn, which we're going to be doing as long as we have our commander on the battlefield, get a 2/2 blue Drake with flying, allowing us that bit of protection there. And when we draw 5 cards per turn, our creatures get +X/+X, which could be quite strong creatures, especially with them having flying with the 2/2 Drakes. Body of Knowledge, no maximum hand size, and when it's dealt damage, draw that many cards. Power and toughness equal to the number of cards in hand, so potentially 100 creature there. And it doesn't necessarily have to survive the hit for you to draw that many cards. So say if it was a 5/5 and it got dealt 20 damage, you still draw the 20 cards. Helps you get through your deck a little bit faster for our win cons. Chasm Skulker, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. When this creature dies, create X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk equals the number of +1/+1 counters on this creature. Once again, if we draw a whole bunch of cards of Body Knowledge, Kami, all the draw power in our deck, really helps us out there. Getting us a lot of creatures for a lot of protection, or a lot of creatures for a lot of damage. Homunculus Horde, when you draw your second card each turn, which we want to do not just during our turn, but during our opponent's turns as well. We get to copy this. It becomes a bit of a Scoots form, not nearly as good just because it is so limited, but still could potentially double. Jushi Apprentice, draw a card. If you have 9 or more cards in hand, flip this card. It's Dream mana to do that, so it's quite expensive, but the other side says target player draws X cards, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Helps us potentially deck out our opponent. We like to see it, especially if we had drawn our entire deck some way. Maybe 100 cards is what make our opponent draw. Mischievous Mystic, another way gets a little bit of protection. This time with flying, with 1/1 anytime we draw a second card. Actually, so far, all of our tokens have had flying, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Doppler stuff had flying too. Onerophage, draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this card. A little bit worse than Chasm Skulker, but still has the flying, which makes it slightly equivalent. Still not as good though, because it doesn't create the tokens after it goes away. But still, Candle's +1/+1 counters is really helpful for us. Psychosis Crawler, we want to make sure that we have a way to actually deal some damage. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in our hand. Equip it with the Imperium Plate. We get to deal a whole bunch of damage to our opponent equal to the number of cards in our hand. We'll double the amount of cards in our hand at a point. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses a life. You know, sometimes if you're drawing your whole deck, that's your opponent's whole life total. Scrawling Crawler, whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose a life. Being your upkeep, each player draws a card, helping everyone draw just a few more cards, but also burning them in the process. It helps out everyone, us included. Stormgeist, power and toughness equals the number of cards in hand. Whenever this deals common damage, so the opposite of, what was its name? Not Logic, Body of Knowledge. You get to draw cards equal. It does have flying, does have to deal common damage to a player, so it is a little bit more limited. But still, doubling the number of cards in your hand could be quite helpful if your opponent does anything with flying. Triskaidekaphile, once again, we want a way to win the game. No maximum hand side, begin with your upkeep. If you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game. You also pay 4 to draw a card, allowing us to get to our second draw during each of our opponent's turns. Thing with this, though, is you do draw the second card off of Kami during your draw step, so it is after the upkeep, so you have to make sure you place one a little bit carefully. 20-toed Toad, no, your maximum hand size is now 20. You attack 2 or more creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on this card, and draw a card. We like drawing cards. Whenever this creature attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on it, or you have 20 or more cards in hand, which is not hard for us to get to with this deck. Laboratory Maniac, if you draw a card while your library is empty, you win the game instead of losing the game. Another way to win the game. We'll have basically our 3 win cons right there. Viceling, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, deal X damage to a player, where X is the number of cards in their hand, -4. It's basically a better version of that artifact we were looking at super early in the video. This is every opponent, not just one. And then Zenith Chronicler. Once again, we're helping everyone draw some cards anytime an opponent casts a multicolored spell. We don't have any because we're in mono blue, so it does rely on our opponent quite a bit, but still, you're going to have at least one person playing multicolored spells. Let's scroll on over to the second half of the deck. For our enchantments, we have Archmage Ascension. At the beginning of your end step, if you draw 2 or more cards this turn, which we're going to attempt to, put a quest counter on this. And as long as it has 6 or more quest counters on it, if you draw a card, instead search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, and shuffle your library. It's quite a good tutor, repeatable. I mean, it does take 6 turns to get to, so it's not the best, but still helpful for us there. Dictator Crufix, another way makes it everyone's drawing some additional cards. This one we could get first because it has flash, so we just flash in at the end of our last opponent's turn, and then this way we're drawing cards first rather than Kami, which makes our opponents draw them first. Force Fruition, whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws 7 cards, really helping us get to our opponents being decked out even easier. Ominous Seas, whenever you draw a card, 4 shadow counter on this. Once you have 8, you can remove them to create an 8/8 Kraken, which could be quite a strong beater or protector, depending on what you need. Eidetic Memory, Enters battlefield, draw a card, no maximum hand size. Being a combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than one card this turn, which we're going to intend to, put X+1/+1 counters on target creature you control, potentially helping us buff up our win cons, so they're harder to remove, buff up our commander, so we get some commander damage in. Depends what we need. Struggle for Project Purity. Enters battlefield, choose one. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. You may draw a card for each card drawn this way, so each of our opponents draw one, we draw three, we like to see it. And whenever a player attacks you with one or more creatures, that player gets twice that many red counters, potentially milling out our opponents. It's going to tend to be the first one that we're going to tend to want, but the second one couldn't hurt if you're close to decking out your opponents. Teferi's Ageless Insight, if you draw a card except the first one each turn, draw two instead. We like to see it. Oh yeah, first one you draw in each of your draw steps. So it could also be, one you draw during your upkeep. Helping us get through our deck a little bit faster for Laboratory Maniac. You could also run Dasa's Oracle in this deck. We just don't. I don't like that card too much, and it's more of a budget-friendly one. Dot Reflection, if you draw a card, draw two cards instead. Same thing with Teferi's Ageless Insight. So it's a little bit better. Left Walking, enters, cast it from your hand, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, draw 7. Helps us get a bunch of draw power to deal some damage to our opponent with Psychosis Crawler, some other cards. And helps us not deck ourselves out if we're not at that point. Well of Ideas, enters the battlefield, draw 2. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. At the beginning of your draw step, draw 2 additional cards. So, same thing with Kami, where we want to look like we're helping out our opponents. In the meantime, we're technically trying to mill them out or deck ourselves out for our Laboratory Maniac. Wizards class, a little bit of draw power. Whenever you draw a card, put +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Also, no maximum hand size. 3 good abilities for helping us out there. Aetherize. Return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Super fun in this deck, especially if our opponent doesn't have a no maximum hand size on board. Makes it so that they'll have to discard at least something. Arcane Denial for a good counterspell. Blue Sun Zenith. Draw X cards, where X is the amount of mana you pay for that X. Shuffle it back into its owner's library, so you're not decking yourself out if you did cast this. But also potentially draw and deal enough damage to win. Counterspell for a counterspell. Engulf the Shore. Return to their owner's hands all creatures with toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control. Everything with less than 34 power and toughness. That's most things in the game in theory. If you had all your islands on the board, of course. Evacuate, and once again, same with Aetherize, we want to make sure we return all cards to their owner's hands so they then have to discard them. High Tide for some additional mana, Pongify for some removal, Solar Units, discard your hand, draw that many cards, potentially discard half our deck, draw the rest of the deck. Potentially a really good way to not deck our opponents out, deal damage with Psychosis Crawler. Vision Skynes, each player draws 2 cards. Another way to deck out our opponent, but also, maybe look like we're helping them a little bit. Words of Wisdom, draw 2 cards. Each other player draws a card. So, a little bit better version of this. I mean, they're about equivalent, because, you draw the same amount of cards, but you're less likely to deck your opponent out with Vision Skynes. Depends where you're at in the game. Islands, Reliquary Tower for no maximum hand size. Curse of the Swine. Exile X target creature cards. For each creature card exiled this way, its controller creates a 2/2 green boar creature token. Basically get rid of all the threats, everyone who's been attacking us, and give them pigs instead. Enter the Infinite, another win con for this deck. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your library, then put a card from your hand on top of your library. No maximum hand size until your next turn, so we don't have to worry about discarding them. And, we don't run it in this deck, but if you run Omniscience, just cast us all those cards for free if you had, 21 mana. Fascination. Each player puts the X cards from their library into his or her graveyard, aka milling out our opponents, or each player draws X cards, also milling out our opponents. Both of which we like to see, depending on what we have in the hand. Flux. Each player chooses and then discards any number of cards, then draws that many cards. We also draw an additional card. We like to see the effect because it helps us get that Psychosis Crawler damage. Mind's Aglow. Yep, that's what it says. Starting with you, each player may put any amount of mana. Starting with you, any player may pay an amount of mana where each player draws X cards, where X is the total amount of mana value paid this way. Helping us get a whole bunch of damage by drawing a whole bunch of cards with Psychosis Crawler, or potentially, decking out our opponents if we paid enough mana. Prosperity, each player draws X cards. But Prosperity helps us so that We can help deck out our opponents and deal damage with Psychosis Scroller on our end. We like to see it. Recurring Insight, draw cards equal to the number of cards in target opponent's hand. Maybe that's our own hand. Oh no, it's not. It can't be our own hand. But since we've been helping out our opponents so much, drawing all those cards, that could be a lot of cards into our hand. Seasonal Weaving, another way to make sure we bounce all of our opponent's cards. I mean, you could run Cyclonic Rift over this, but this does also give you the option of drawing cards. You could potentially draw 5 off this as well. But overall, you could make our opponent discard some cards that they want on the board. Skyscribing, each player draws X cards, decking out our opponent, helping us get that Psychosis Scroller damage. We like to see it. Tales of the Ancestors, each player with fewer cards in hand, then the player with the most cards in hand draws cards equal to the difference. Once again, another way to deck out our opponents. And Windfall, the ultimate way to deck out our opponents. If we, had a way to draw our entire deck, and then we have everyone discard their card and draw 100, that's quite a bit of cards that we'll be decking not only ourselves out, but our opponents. But that's the deck there. If you guys enjoyed the deck, make sure you like the video. If you guys want to see more like this, subscribe so you can stay tuned for future videos. But thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of the day.